and also the meter statement for last month. We received tax funds this past month that totaled $3,369,498.59. A phone call from that we were overdue 6 months paying the bills for the emergency fund in the parks. This informed us that Carol Symmes, the previous fiscal officer, had arranged in February of 2020 for these bills to be sent to her email address rather than hard copies of the Township. Ms. Symmes did not inform anyone that I know of this change, and hence we did not receive these bills. Begs the question of why it was done, knowing that she was going to be leaving office the following month. Luckily, there were no late fees attached to those bills. I have one public records request from A.J. Clark that was identical to a request made to and answered by Kim Symmes.
Okay, any questions? All right, presentations, we have none. Before we get to hearing from residents, I want to make sure, I say this every meeting, this is a really rough time in our community. And I want to make sure that if we know someone that is struggling, that we reach out to them. And if you don't want to reach out to them, call the Township and we will reach out to them. I'm happy to help anybody if they need grocery shopping or whatever they need. Just be a good neighbor and take care of each other. So let's move from hearing from residents. I think at this time, I think we have one candidate here. We're only going to hear, unless you have another subject, if you're here for the land use plan, let's hold our comments till that. But if someone wants to speak other than that, please come forward. Carmen.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it okay if I remove my mask?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all so much for hosting me, and thank you, Ms. Leese, for having me come and talk to your committee. I'd like to, first of all, introduce myself. I'm Charmaine McGuffey, and I'm running to be the next sheriff of Hamilton County. And I'm here because I know that our county deputies deliver an excellent product for Symmes Township. I've been in the department for 33 years. I rose in rank, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and then major, the highest ranking woman in the history of the sheriff's office. You know, it has always been my goal and endeavor to work towards improving the sheriff's office wherever we can. And I do know that our deputies deliver a great product out here in Symmes for all of you. I know many of them, if not all. I ran the training academy way back when. Please give my regards to your father, by the way. And I will tell you a little bit about who I am. I worked for Sheriff Simon Lease for 26 years. And in that 26 years, I learned about fiscal responsibility. I learned about discipline, and I learned about law and order. And I am a law and order candidate. Everybody knows it. The deputies know it, and so do the prisoners. Anybody that has any association with our sheriff's department knows that I am sincere. I don't put up with any shenanigans. I'm law and order. I learned that in the 33 years that I worked in the sheriff's office. I do have, my tenure has been primarily in the jail, but I have worked in nearly every facet of the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. I worked in an arm of road patrol, which was the electronic monitoring, and I've been a trainer throughout our department, and that's in the police training academies as well as the jail training academies. I know that, people need to know about me because, quite frankly, I know that some people have some reservations that I may be, on some social agenda. I want to reassure you this. My agenda for the sheriff's office is to improve it. My agenda for the sheriff's office is to create a very disciplined, well-structured, and fiscally responsible sheriff's office. And if you like the service you're getting now, you will like what else we're going to do here. We are only going to improve. That's my goal. It's exactly what I want to do as sheriff of Hamilton County. I can take any questions that anybody might have. Otherwise, I'll just tell you this. You know, I've been running for this office for almost 2 years now. I have met a tremendous amount of people out in the community, including Symmes Township. And what I'm so impressed about is the fact that people are wanting to be educated about law enforcement. They want to improve law enforcement. They want community policing relations to improve. And I intend to restore trust where there is a fracture of trust in our communities. I intend to do that because I have long-standing relationships with the communities surrounding, not just Symmes Township, but all throughout Hamilton County. So I do humbly introduce myself to you. I ask you to ask me any questions. Is that part of your format, that you could ask questions? Sometimes they can't.
We technically don't, but we don't have a lot of people here. So if there's a quick question, you may, someone can ask. Anyone?
Okay. Well, I thank you all very much for your time, and I thank you for your service, and I appreciate you listening to me, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Good luck.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to speak that's not regarding the land use plan? Okay. So we're going to move to the public hearing for the land use plan. I want to let Steve Johns come up and give a presentation. Can't speak through this thing. I need to move, don't I? Oh, can I? I'm going to open the public hearing too.
Thank you. Do you mind if I take off my mask? Thank you. Fogs up my glasses and you probably can hear me a bit better. Good evening. My name is Steve Johns and I'm with the Hamilton County Department of Planning and Development. I'm the Planning Services Administrator, and with me tonight is Brian Snyder, who is also with Hamilton County Planning and Development and administers the Symmes Township zoning ordinance. Tonight, we wanted to present to you the revised proposed land use plan for the township. As you might recall, we had a hearing in July with some degree of controversy, and it was right kind of in the midst of COVID, and we were struggling a bit with technology, mass, noise, a lot of things. So I apologize for my conduct during that meeting. I felt like I was not as professional as I can be, and I look forward to tonight to really make sure that we knock it out of the park on this current land use plan. Tim, if you could go to the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about why we do land use plans. Let's see if that works. Page down.
Technology. Even does not it's this year.
If you get it up there, we can change the page.
You want to escape out of it and try to. We can just drive it from the just the PowerPoint itself without being in the actual slideshow right there. Yeah. So you want to close that and just click on slide 2. Great. Thank you. So we do a land use plan because of its impact on what we can do in zoning, right? So way back when zoning started about 100 years ago, we were trying to separate uses, right? There were industrial factories that no one wanted to live next to because of the pollution and things associated with them. And that really was the real genesis of why we were started doing zoning and land use planning. We know that there's different types of land use and they all have kind of different impacts. Residential folks usually have low impacts and usually want to be separated in their own subdivisions and things like that. Commercial activities can have their own impacts. You know, we've all heard that beeping truck unloading trash at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, right? So sometimes we want to separate that a bit from residential uses. And Symmes Township doesn't have that many industrial uses, but there are some still around in some of the older sections of the township. So that's something too that we want to try to buffer where possible and separate from other uses that might not, or might have a negative impact from them. So when we are developing a land use plan, we look at the existing uses. That's really usually how we start. And then we try to think about what kind of changes might be happening in the next 5 or 10 years that we'd want to indicate on a land use plan to show that that area might be in transition or could change based on economic trends. When we were practicing this presentation, Kim talked about the widening of a road, the putting in of an interchange. All those things would impact land use in that area. So those are the kind of things we look at. We also look at spot land uses. If there's a land use out in the middle of a subdivision that doesn't match a subdivision, we kind of scratch our head and say, how did that end up there? Maybe that's something we'd want to see change to something that's more appropriate for that area. So those kind of spot little individuals surrounded by another type of land use. And then we want to try to create transitions between intensities of land use. So generally, industrial is the most intense land use, and residential or green space are some of the least intense. So we try to make a kind of a spectrum, and you'll see in an upcoming slide the variety of land uses we use to try to transition from those very intense uses to very low intensity uses. And sometimes we use natural or man-made features to separate those land uses. You can imagine railroads, creeks, rivers, interstates are good things that can help separate land uses. So we also do these plans every 5 years as our goal to fix errors. There's thousands of parcels in Symmes Township, right? So once in a while we get a handful wrong. So when we come back and take a nice sharp look like we did this time around, we can see some things that maybe the last time we looked at it are things that we should fix. And a reminder that this is not zoning. So zoning is the piece that has the legal requirements to it. This is a tool to help us think about what might happen to zoning, but it has no authority over people's properties. So next slide. Yeah, so we use all these colors to represent different land uses, and it starts with very low intensity uses like rural residences, farms or things that are on large lots. Then we go to single family residences. That's mostly your subdivisions and things in the quarter to acre size of a residence. Then we have something called transitional residence. Sometimes that is used as a buffer between retail uses or multifamily residences and might go up to things like attached units, perhaps like townhouses. Single family cluster is when we have areas that have maybe a steep slope or some other natural feature that you can't build on, so you move the houses closer together, so they might have higher density, but they're still of single family character. Attached single family is straight up, like things like townhouses, condos, and the like. Multifamily residence are apartments generally. Special purpose residence, we don't see that very often. That might be a special school, a place where maybe nuns or priests live or something like that. So it's those kind of uses. Transitional mixed use is again a category we use often for buffering between areas and might include things like offices or very light retail. General office is exactly what it sounds, office parks, doctor's offices, things like that. Retail neighborhood is low intensity retail that you might see in a smaller area, not near an interchange, where you have a fair amount of general retail, right? Up here at Fields Erdel area, where it's large scale retail, big boxes maybe, gas stations, things like that. Planned mixed use employment is something that we used a fair bit in this land use plan. That's a way to allow a little more freedom to say that a lot of times commercial areas can have a little bit of office, a little bit of retail, a little bit of sometimes even mixed use to there, some maybe an apartment mixed in. So that's something that's happening more and more. Light industrial is kind of self-evident, and heavy industry might be what you would, what I was referring to, the 100 years ago, the factory with belching smoke and stuff like that. So we don't see that as much anymore. Green space and agriculture, again, fairly self-evident. And then public, semi-public, institutional, things like this building, churches, schools fall into that category. And finally, utility. So a substation, a Duke Energy substation, a wastewater treatment plant, those would fall under the utility category. So we had a bunch of people help us with this. So we come in with our training in planning, but you folks know the township much better than we do. So we look to your input, and we had a bunch of volunteers, including Jeff Reichman, who's here with us tonight. Thanks, Jeff, for being here. Dima Alman-Niabi, I can't get her name quite right, but I will keep practicing. Byron Fowler, Jack Horvath, and Ralph Wolf were the other volunteers on that committee. We had a representation from the Board of Trustees. Trustee Beck was on this group. We had staff representation and your township administrator, Kim, and both myself and Brian Snyder were also on this committee. There was a process we went through. We had an introductory meeting back about a year ago, September 10th, 2019. Then we talked about process and things like that. Our second meeting, we really dug in and looked for changes that we might want to make. The third meeting in November, we talked about if there were any additional changes, wanted to be sure we knew what we were talking about before we had our public open house where people could comment on our proposed changes. And that was at the beginning of January. Then, of course, there was COVID, and so things got slowed down a little bit. So we did a Zoom meeting, I believe, that on May 6th with the Land Use Committee to talk about what we heard about at the open house. And then that initial presentation to the trustees we held back in July when we heard a lot of comment on our proposal. We'd like, just for ease of looking at the township, since the township has a bit of an odd shape, we looked at three different sections. The southern section covers the Camp Dennison area. The middle section, kind of the Remington, Loveland, Madeira Road, and Twietwee, I'll get that right someday too, Twietwee, got it. Area, northern section, more of the Montgomery Road to Little Miami River, kind of the core of the township is that northern section. So we'll work through these three sections real quick and talk about the proposed changes as we have them tonight. So in the southern section, near Camp Dennison, there were one minor error. It was on the kind of northern part of that pink area. I have my laser pointer that show that. So right up here. And that little green area was actually in the 2009 plan listed as neighborhood retail. That is actually owned by ODOT. So we wanted to change that to the public semi-public because it's right of way. And then
in 2009 and in 2020 fixed it.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the other spot we noticed was that the Daughters of the American Revolution own this property right here. Let's see, that has let me get the right name on it. That's the Waldschmidt House, I believe, is on that property, right on State Route 126 down there. And so that was previously the yellow. That was designated for residential. And we thought that that made more sense as public semi-public, since I don't think there's plans to develop it. We did have in previous proposals, which we got a lot of input about, is at Lincoln and Glendale Milford Road here at State Route 126. We proposed that 2 additional corners be put into the pink, which would be neighborhood retail. We changed that based on the input that we heard from the last meeting. So those 2 spots that do have pink on it were from the 2009 plan, the northwest corner and the southeast corner of that intersection. Since we're on this, if the trustees have any questions about that area before we move on, I'd be happy to try to answer anything.
Did you say those small areas you were just referencing were retail?
Yes, in the 2009 plan, they were designated neighborhood retail. So there's been no change to that area between the 2009 and the 2020 plan. The only changes are the 2 ones that are highlighted with the red circles.
Why was the upper one there? Why was that?
I would call that in the category of error, right? We just took that area and said, we're going to make that whole area pink all the way up to the intersection of the bike trail, or where the bike trail and State Route 126 come together. And so in a closer look, we saw that that doesn't make sense because it's owned by the state.
That was from 2009.
That's correct.
Okay.
So what happens when you have something in error like that?
We fix it this time around. We say, let's make sure we get this right. So, clearly that's right of way that either the state wanted or needed for Route 126. So they're not going to be building retail in that area.
So what are the ramifications of having it designated in error?
Well, there is no, we're fixing the error in this.
What if they wanted to do something, willfully in 2010 or 2012? Would it then have been discovered that it was in error?
Yes. And so if they were looking to try to do a zoning change for a development they wanted to do, and they wanted to say, hey, we're not in compliance with the land use plan, we could, during that process, say, oh, that was an error in the land use plan when we did our staff report on that particular case.
Who's error?
So whoever, the 2009, it was actually not Hamilton County that did the plan. It was a consultant that put together the plan that then was adopted by the trustees at that time. I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question appropriately to answer it.
Well, I wondered how an error like that occurred.
Well, I think it just gets back to this issue of, ODOT's not like a economic interest that would have been maybe paying attention a little closer and saying, hey, you just put my area in the wrong use. So, they don't have plans except for building roads or maintaining right of way at this time. So nobody got red flagged. Whereas some of the other areas that we're going to talk about later, we heard about because people saw that those were in error and they came to us and said, it's in my economic interest not to have it at that land use that you had designated back in 2009. So I think that's the big piece to it, that both these properties in Camp Dennison, really there was nothing to gain from these property owners in these changes, right? It's just to reflect their current use. Good questions. All right, let's go to the middle section. And as you can see, in the middle section, it's primarily residential, a lot of subdivisions you see there. But the two more commercial areas are where we had some proposed changes, both in the Remington area and the Twite-Twee area. And so we're going to zoom into those two areas and talk about the proposed changes there. So many of you are probably familiar with this area. There's a pretty main intersection here between Loveland Madeira Road and Glendale Milford Road. And you can see that there's a lot of neighborhood retail around it, which makes sense at a fairly major intersection like that. There was one parcel that was designated office in this area, and it seemed to be such a small parcel that it's going to be hard to develop individually as an office. So we thought it made a lot more sense to match the existing retail nearby it. So that's a proposed change on this one individual parcel right here. Also, this area you see here is the railroad. So that's why there's a fair amount of industrial, this purple color behind it. Classically, land uses would be located near the railroad if they were industrial. So we are proposing this one little area right here back to the south of the railroad to be light industrial. It previously was transitional mixed use. And so we've talked about how there's kind of a hodgepodge of uses back there right now. It's like self-storage unit, a church, a variety of uses. And we thought that it would make more sense to make it all the same type of use, a light industrial use. So that was our thinking process there. And then is this Hopewell Road right here? It comes down and intersects with Loveland Madeira. There's a little like 2-family or 3-family house right here. And we wanted to move that from transitional residence, which would allow for that use, to match the other uses around it for transitional mixed use. So we could see that becoming something like an office or something like that. So just, again, trying to avoid these spot uses. It was just this one little parcel was the only parcel in the transitional mixed use category, or excuse me, the transitional residence, and we're turning it to the transitional mixed use. Any questions on this section in Remington? Great. We'll move to Twaitwee area. We made 3 little changes here. There was what I think was a former substation for Duke. It was a public service. It was a utility color at this section. It's at Kemper and Loveland Madeira Road, just southwest of that intersection. And we decided to match again the adjacent land uses with the neighborhood retail designation for that spot. It's no longer a substation. In the blue, this is again the utility category, and we changed those boundaries to match the actual extent of the wastewater treatment plant that is there. And then we found another error. This line did not follow property lines between the neighborhood retail and the light industrial. So we rectified that by moving it to along the property lines there. Are there any questions in this section? Great. Moving on to the big section of the township. So the northern section, all the way from the boundary with Sycamore Township to the Little Miami River. We found a fair number of changes by the Little Miami River over here by Loveland Castle. We heard a lot of comments about that, and we'll zoom into that area in a next slide. And then we also found a couple of mistakes, errors in this area by the Little Miami River. There are a couple parcels here that are privately held that were designated public, semi-public, institutional, and we changed those back to residential.
So those are on the map from 2009.
That's correct. So there were errors. There were a fair number of errors in this area. If Kim, if you go to the next one, yeah. And I think part of the reason for those errors, what you can see that in this area by Loveland Castle, which sits on this parcel, there's a lot of very small parcels in this area. And I think even the mapping part, you could see on that bigger map that when you show it at a certain scale, it almost all looks black because the lines disappear. So I think it was hard to make adjustments in this area back in 2009, in part just due to mapping problems. But now that we are a little even more sophisticated in mapping, we were able to go in and find that there are a couple parcels, the ones that are shaded in that light green minty color, that are owned by Symmes Township. So those should stay the public, semi-public, institutional. But the majority of that area is privately held again. And so we wanted to turn that back from what it was designated in 2009, public, semi-public, to residential. So that was a big change in this area. There's also one little parcel here, I believe, maybe it was two, I believe, that were also indicated in the public, semi-public in 2009, and we caught that error this time around, in part due to public comment from our last meeting, and changed those back to residential. And then you might recall that there was a lot of debate about Loveland Castle itself. We had created a new land use category, one that is used in Anderson Township, for scenic river commercial for this property, and it was going to be designated that land use, but we heard a lot of feedback that no, keep it public, semi-public, institutional, like it was back in the 2009 plan. So we removed that proposed change. So a lot going on in that area, but I think we've made the changes that we heard back from the community about. All right. So then in the big section of the township along Montgomery Road here, there were two areas of commercial non-residential uses that we wanted to look at. So we're going to zoom into those two. And the first one is right next to this building, right? And again, were a variety of uses around this building in the 2009 map. There were some office uses, there were some transitional mixed use areas, There's still the areas that are owned by the township, which are this mint green again, are public, semi-public uses. And what we decided is to turn them into this planned mixed use area, which is the orange with the red hatch, to allow more flexibility in this area for both retail and office type uses. There were a couple controversial parcels adjacent to the subdivision across the street that are not part of the subdivision. We had proposed transitional residence on those parcels and heard back from the community that that is not what they wanted, so we turned those back to single-family residential as they were in 2009. And finally, we looked at the area near Union Cemetery Road and at Montgomery Road. In 2009, there were some areas that were indicated to be office uses near this intersection. If you know that intersection today, they're mostly retail uses in that area, so we changed it to the red color to indicate the retail nature of that area. Also, the parcel next door was also a different color, and now that is a Duke Energy substation, so we changed that to the dark blue, the utility land use. Are there any questions in this area? Excellent, we're in the home stretch. I think this is the last section here, down on the southern end of Montgomery Road. This was a pretty easy change up on Kemper. This was in the 2009 plan, previously designated single-family residential cluster, but that use changed to office. So we changed the land use color to office to match that changed use. And then you know that along Montgomery Road, there are a variety of uses. Some are offices, some are retail. Obviously at Harper's Point, you have a lot of retail, particularly along the frontage, these out parcels, the Kroger sits here. But we know that retail is going through a lot of transition. We talked some in the land use committee about the impact of Amazon, and now we have got COVID on top of that, that more and more people are shopping online. So we wanted to grant some flexibility with these commercial areas that if they wanted to transition to something different that was in a mixed use employment nature, so an office, potentially maybe an Amazon pickup distribution kind of place, retail's changing, right? So we want to be able to have that flexibility to allow those kind of types of uses. So that's why we changed it to this mixed use employment category. Again, that's that orange with the red hatch on it. So we want people to be able to, we're pretty confident that these areas outside of the single family subdivisions, but with frontage along Montgomery Road, are going to be that type of use. And that's what we have for you tonight. What we also wanted to let you know what the next steps were. So obviously with this public hearing, we want to hear from the public, but then we're hoping to have adoption tonight by the trustees. And upon that adoption, it will be sent to the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission for consideration and adoption there. And then hopefully we'll be back here in another 5 years to look at the land use again. That is the recommended timeframe that we look at this. So thank you again for allowing us to help with this process, and we look forward to doing it again in 5 years. Thank you.
Can we have public comments now before I close it? Okay. So I'm going to welcome anybody who would like to make a public comment. Before we do, I want to make sure I thank the committee because they did a lot of hard work and it took a lot of their time. So I want to thank everybody that was on the committee and know that we appreciate everything they did. Okay. So anybody who has a public comment, come on up. I know it's so hard with these masks.
My name is Susan Leininger. I'm with the Ohio Daughters of the American Revolution that has a property in Camp Dennison that you pointed out. I guess we just recently became aware of the land use potential change. And I had some questions and I guess some concerns. We do have on the property 3 what I would call basically single-family homes. 2 are operated as house museums. 1 is actually occupied by our caretaker and his family full-time. I noticed the proposed change was to drop the single-family residence. And actually, you had mentioned that since you were looking at current use in your plan, that is a current use. And we have some reservations and don't know what the impact would be should we drop the single-family residence from the current land use designation.
Sorry, Brian Snyder. There wouldn't be any change to the current use in any way. The land use plan is a recommendation for the future. I think the recognition of it as a public, semi-public institutional, something that should be preserved, is shown by changing it to public, semi-public institutional, and residences are permitted in that land use category, and it's permitted in the current zoning, which wouldn't change. So it wouldn't have any impact whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Do we not have anyone?
Mark LeGuillen, 9355 McKinney Road. I'm not opposed to the land use, the maps, et cetera, not at all. That's part of what's important. However, am opposed to 2 things. The committee seems to have done its job well. The process and the information available to the residents and access to the correct parcel lists, changes, and maps was terrible. In the last meeting we had here, it was made very clear that the map was clear, correct, and updated in January. Come to find out after the fact, it was not. And Mr. Beck, thank you for stepping in and saying, we need to scrutinize every property and make sure that it's done correctly. I appreciate that.
Which we did. I thank Kim for that.
Again, no. I just think it was terribly done is I guess my concern with that. Second thing I have that I have a little negative feeling about is at one point we seem to be rushing to get this done. My question is, whom or what circumstances put us in the position of being 6 years late? I don't recall somebody saying, oh yeah, we talked about it 4 years ago about doing something about it. But it seems to me that 6 years tardy was no reason to even suggest moving forward quickly. So again, my real concern is the process and the execution of the process. Again, from what I understand, the committee going over the parcels and whatever, all that was done well. Producing the maps and the information to the residents and people who were of concern was terrible. I just think that somebody should be, I hate to use the word ashamed, but somebody should be really seriously concerned about the process. There are other things that we've talked about in the past that process seems to be the issue. And I would like that the trustees seriously consider that the process and the information to the residents and being readily available is a very high priority. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carol Symmes. I live at 9972 Washington Street. I'd like to thank you for the presentation you did tonight. It was much better than the last one when all you had was those boards. Much better presentation. It seemed like at the last meeting, there wasn't quite so many parcels or sites as what's been provided on the list, which is on the website. Am I incorrect? Just wasn't covered or what?
Well, the last meeting, there wasn't really a staff presentation. Because the meeting didn't flow to us as staff, the presentation of the individual parcels. There were a number of parcels that were identified in comments to the trustees prior to the meeting, that the trustees addressed at the beginning of the meeting. Those seem to be the major points of contention with everybody that was in attendance. Those were all changed. The rest of them were all the maps. Had been on the map since the land committee had formalized the recommendation.
But wasn't
There
that,
were some slight errors in the corner areas, like, speed went through tonight, between then and now, but the scope of the changes was very much the same at that meeting as it is tonight. And the number of parcels is very close to the same then as it is tonight.
but wasn't that a public hearing? That meeting was a public hearing on the land use plan. So it would have been beneficial to have had all the information that we presented tonight.
So you want to look back at that, yes?
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay. It just seems to me that the first list that I saw on the website, there was about 181 parcels, sites. And the new listing now is like 248 sites. Was the first listing an incomplete listing or what?
I would say that it's more than likely that many of those parcels that we talked about near Loveland Castle, all those little slices would account for a good bit of those. I think in going through it with a fine-tooth comb, like the public asked for at the July meeting, we did pick up some additional parcels, yes. I think what Brian was saying, that there are many areas that we thought were not controversial at all that included many parcels. All that stuff along Montgomery Road that we changed to, or was recommended to be changed to mixed use, planned mixed use employment, accounted for a large majority of the number of parcels that are included in this land use change. But what the input we got from both staff, the trustees, and the land use committee and the public was that maybe there were a dozen or so locations that were of extreme interest, and perhaps in looking at them more closely, we picked up some additional parcels.
So those additional parcels that got added, were they reviewed by the land use plan committee or by the trustees, or were they just added to the list?
So I think I have to say that the committee at that point had done most of its job by the July hearing. And so the adjustments now were in the hands of staff and the trustees.
So when the trustees then decided to add these, the trustees would have added these additional sites to the changes, those changes. Huh?
The trustees have taken no action.
No, I thought he said the staff and the trustees added the parcels.
Staff presented them to the board.
And when were they presented to the trustees? I guess I should ask you guys, when were these additional sites presented to the trustees to be included on the land use
We're
plan?
looking at it formally tonight, same time you are.
The only
So
thing that
staff
we were
just
made aware
added-
of, Carol, was when there was a mistake from 2009 and they were correcting the mistake around Loveland Castle. That's the parcels that I'm aware that I was made aware of prior to tonight.
So staff
correcting the mistake.
added this additional parcels, and you're hearing about them tonight.
We changed the maps. They've been on the website and made public since they changed. So the trustees that are going to review them, they've been formally presented. Just like everybody that's supposed to review and take some public
What's the definition of the plan mixed-use employment area?
I don't have that right at my fingertips, but I'm happy to look it up if you give me a second.
Because you kept saying that it contained, that is one defined as containing office and retail. Does it not also include light industrial within that definition?
because
So all these parcels that we're changing, that got mentioned that they're going to be changed to this plan use to be allowed greater flexibility. And you mentioned office and retail, it's also light industrial. So it does include light industrial. Okay. So there's like 113 parcels that are being changed to this. Some of them are being changed from single family, traditional mixed use, public, semi-public, and institutional. What category of those 4 categories provides the best protection to the surrounding areas? If I have a residential house and it butts up to one of these things that's being changed to, it was, let's say that it was mixed use, transitional mixed use, and now you're changing it to plan. Am I better protected with the plan, or am I better protected with traditional mixed use?
The plan mixed use plan encourages it to be a plan based on the plan. It also calls for unified design and landscape plan for the use. So again, based on the administrative plan, we've got a lot of people on the road. And the fact that the land use category falls to be plan development, we would allow for some protection. They would all have to be EVs, there would be a public process, there would be a dedicated plan of parents, part of that, and directors as well to do that. As part of any redevelopment or any change to
But by definition, if somebody wanted to do light industrial within that plan mixed use area, light industrial would be approved. Hamilton County Regional would recommend approval of the zone change because it does say light industrial.
not necessarily, no. That's the color on the map. The definition would be used for light the impact on the neighborhood, operating as well as planning commission's recommendation. There's going to have super recommendation to the trustees. The trustees will have a final say.
Correct, but a developer looking at a place to put some light industrial could look at our land use plan and go, oh, this plan, what's it called? Plan mixed use employment area does include the possibility of light industrial. So it might be of interest to them.
Yes, but they still have to come through us, Carol.
She's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. But it just leads to them looking at that. There are many parcels that are owned by Symmes Township, which are now classified public, semi-public, and institutional. And that's the correct classification for that?
It's the historic classification for properties owned by the government, yes.
Okay. So then why are there so many parcels that are owned by Symmes Township which are being reclassified to this planned mixed-use employment area?
Where exactly?
There are many parcels that are owned by Symmes Township that show it's going from public to planned mixed-use employment.
Roadways?
Some of the parcels are 620, 202, 054, 03, 04, 05. Not quite sure where it's at. So I'm just wondering, I mean, in your presentation, you're saying that the parcel that was owned by ODOT should have been public, semi-public because it's owned by a government. So if there's parcels that's owned by Symmes Township, would they not remain public, semi-public, institutional instead of being planned, change this planned mixed-use employment area? And if we are changing it, what would be the rationale to change them?
So land use plans, and this is, this goes back to the original discussion. Land use plans were originally done with markers on paper section maps. And the concept of land use planning was never to have land use plans be parcel specific, like you follow the property lines and you switch from one category to the next when you go through. Now, historically, we have gone through and identified public properties as public, semi-public, institutional, because they're owned by the public. In cases where a small parcel might be between two larger retail areas, it doesn't really make sense for, especially like an old roadway or some kind of street property that's owned by the township, to show that as semi-public surrounded by retail. Or, you know, I don't know, there are properties that are zoned for retail that are owned by the township, but they're zoned for retail, that may be shown as retail because of the zoning. I mean, there are a number of reasons for this. And again, like Steve said, there are thousands of parcels in the township, and, you know, transitioning from a non-parcel specific hand-colored map to the more sophisticated digital mapping, the more we get into it and the further we look into it, the closer we look at every parcel. That's where a lot of these errors get identified and a lot of the changes come from. It's not to say that the map currently is perfect, and I'm not sure which parcels you're referring to. Specifically, I know you have the parcel numbers. I can't look them up right this second to tell you what exactly parcels those are. I'm not sure if you've looked them up and know which ones they are.
I do.
Is there any that's not a roadway that you're specifically concerned about?
Nope, they're not roadways. Nope, they're not roadways. There is a parcel that you have that's listed as 0603 OA23 0221, marked as Vintage Church. I'm not quite sure where that's located. It's being changed from retail neighborhood to this planned mixed-use employment area. 603 is not Symmes Township. 603, I think it's Montgomery. But because it's like a OA2302221, it doesn't come up on the other's website. But I do know 603. Symmes Township is all 620. So within your listing of the proposed changes, you've got this parcel that's an 0603.
You know, it's very difficult not having our technology with us right here to identify those parcels. We're happy to take your list, look at them, and identify them.
But the trustees might be adopting what you've presented tonight, in which case that's going to be changed.
Is that the only parcel you have a question on? I'm just curious.
No, I have a question about another one. It's a vacant piece of property. It's currently, I think it's public, currently it's public, semi-public. It's being changed again to this planned mixed-use employment area. And it's vacant property owned by Gate of Heaven. So why would we be changing something owned by the Gate of Heaven, which is never going to be, it's going to be a cemetery use, something. Why are we arbitrarily changing this? Did we contact the Gate of Heaven and say, this is what we're proposing? Do you have any questions, or are we just changing it?
Well, to go back to the previous one, just briefly, if it's in Loveland, obviously the land use plan has no effect on anything that's outside of Symmes Township. So if there was a parcel in a different jurisdiction that was inadvertently included in the land use plan, it has no bearing on what they do, and it doesn't have anything to do with Symmes Township since it's not in Symmes Township. It would be an error that can just be eliminated without the need for the trustees' approval because it's not in the township. It would be just a mapping error that we would just fix if that's the case.
You would fix before it was adopted by the trustees.
No, once they adopt it and they've included parcels that are in a different jurisdiction, we as staff of the Regional Planning Commission, before the Planning Commission adopts it, we can remove those because they're not in Symmes Township.
Can I ask a question real quick? Carol, you're very familiar with land use plan because you've been involved in the land use plan, right? Before in Symmes Township when you were employed by us?
But I have questions regarding tonight's presentation, Jody.
Okay, but did you do 2009 land use plan?
I was the secretary of the committee.
Okay.
There was a committee
So,
that did it.
I think you're very familiar with how it goes and you understand. And there were mistakes on 2009 and you were the secretary at 2009. So now you understand what the committee goes through. It's very hard to individualize every parcel. So sometimes there are mistakes made, but they get corrected.
But about 113 parcels that are being changed to this planned mixed-use employment area, which provides for light industrial, is very alarming to me as a resident, as well as anybody whose property butts up to these parcels that are being changed to this use. Because it does allow light industrial. Probably it's not going to happen, but it does allow it.
It won't happen as long as we're trustees.
Yeah. Montgomery Church. The churches, I think you mentioned, should all be public, semi-public. In your presentation before, you mentioned, I thought I caught that.
That is typical, yes.
Okay, so you got Montgomery Church and you got the Sycamore Church, who are all being changed to the planned mixed-use employment area.
So this is the discussion of the committee. Montgomery Road is a commercial corridor. The fact that there was a mixture of various land uses along the entire corridor that only reflected what the current use of the property was troublesome to the committee. There was a specific discussion with some of the committee members who wanted it all to be a unified land use category on Montgomery Road, because if we're planning for the future, we should be planning for we shouldn't be planning for this mix of, office, transitional, retail, public, semi-public, single family on Montgomery Road, that all of the properties on Montgomery Road would make sense to be a similar category, since it's a similar road and the character of the roadway is similar. And with the pockets of residential aside, the parts that are commercial should be similar. And that was the feeling of the committee. And that's the recommendation of the committee, was to change all of those to a unified land use category. Now, the typical, only including the current use on the future land use plan, has been the case for land use planning for years. But the forward thinking of the committee was actually the way that land use planning should be. You shouldn't be planning to have a church on Montgomery Road. A church is allowed to be on Montgomery Road, but if you were planning for the church to be something else, you wouldn't tell somebody that they had to have a church there because you were planning on keeping a church there forever. The plan was, I thought that the land use committee was fairly progressive in saying that we want a consistent theme along the entire roadway, because it doesn't make sense to have all these mixture of uses. But anyway, that was what the committee recommended to the trustees, and that's the reason that there are parcels there that would typically be shown as something else in previous land use planning efforts that are shown as planned mixed use employment now.
But a land use plan is a guide for zoning, correct?
Yes.
It shouldn't be vice versa. We shouldn't be saying this is what we want for zoning, and therefore we're going to have it on a land use plan. So it shouldn't be based on a future development.
No, it was the previous plan, the 2009 plan, was very much based on the current zoning. And the plan that's being recommended is very much being based on what's more than likely to happen on Montgomery Road. Like I said, I from a planning standpoint, from a professional planner, what the land use committee did on Montgomery Road was, I thought, right up the alley of what you do when you do a land use plan, which is what we're taught in school to do as land use planning. You're supposed to think about the future uses, not what the current zoning is. And the previous plan was basically a current zoning map.
I wouldn't say that was a true statement, but I mean, as residents, we should be able to look at what a land use plan shows and know that, even future residents, that if they buy a piece of property and they look at the land use plan, they're going to be able to tell what could be used there, correct?
Sure, but saying that a church is what's there and that your land use plan is calling for there to be a church there isn't realistic either. When the church sells to somebody else, you can't tell the property owner who buys it that they can only have a church. That's not constitutional.
But what's the definition of public, semi-public?
That's not on the sheet, that's on a different paper. Yeah.
Do you have it?
It's public or institutional buildings. I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like.
It's active parks, playgrounds, community centers, schools, and churches.
Right.
So if the definition within the adopted definitions is that churches should be classified as public, semi-public, why would we want to put them into this planned mixed use employment area? I got a question on the parcel next to the Five Season, that vacant triangle parcel. It was currently attached single family. You're recommending a change to general office? What's the ration?
Might have an older version, Carol. If we want to pull up that slide, I think, Kim, you had noted some of these ones that Carol's talking about, and we made those changes.
I took it from the list that's on the website.
Do we need to move?
So we are talking about this right here. And the map that was presented tonight, that is the same as it was in.
Which is what?
Which is the attached.
Attached single family.
So it is not going to be general office as was requested by a developer.
No.
Okay.
And I think this map also shows the data heaven site, public safety stuff. I believe, I'm not sure, Carol, you brought these up with staff or not, but we attempted to catch those things that you had done.
Then the list needs to be changed because the list, I think, is incorrect.
And those are on the 2009, right? The way we fixed them this year, is that from 2009?
So we didn't touch, we had,
That was on 2009.
that's correct. We had proposed changes at that location, at these locations. In working with staff, we recognized that we did not actually want to make this change.
Correct. I know per your minutes, a developer had asked for that to be changed to general office. And that's the one reason why I want to make sure it's not being changed to general office.
She mentioned
Thank you.
Sycamore Church and Montgomery Community Church. Can you point those out there and show us? Does it change classifications? I don't see it.
No, it actually
I think
doesn't.
this
It
is
doesn't.
Montgomery Community Church,
It's been changed.
and I think
Right.
Sycamore
It's been changed
Church.
back.
Right,
The list appears to be the piece of the.
I don't see where they're changed.
I guess then the point that I need to make is that what you have on your website, again, does not agree with what you're proposing. Again, you're not providing information to the residents. I'm looking at the list that was provided on your website that shows me that those parcels were being changed the way I was mentioned.
Okay.
They're not being reflected on your map.
I didn't see it.
So your stuff is not agreeing. Again, you're not providing the information. Your information is incorrect on the website.
Kim? Hold on, I'm looking it up.
Mark LeGuillen, 9355 McKinney Road. After hearing the exchange, I would like all three of you to assure me that the housekeeping and all the parcels were scrutinized and corrected as promised. Clearly from that exchange, it didn't happen.
No, see, there's two maps. There's two parcels and you have to go to the right date. Here's 2007-16, 2009-21. You
And
have to go to the correct parcel map. So it was in one file is what happened. So somebody must have just clicked
so
on
we
the
have a
wrong
correct
tab.
one and a wrong one.
It wasn't
So-
wrong. It was the one that was proposed
Old
initially.
and new in the same file.
Right, it was a parcel tab. So they're tabs. So you have to go to the right date at the bottom, but they are there.
So the
So we
map.
did provide the information. It was just the wrong one that got clicked on.
Okay, so when the map was up there, the parcels that were highlighted are the right colors
Yes.
and the correct zoning.
Yes. Well, no, we're not talking about zoning. It's
I'm
only
sorry,
land use.
correct
Land use.
parcels of land use,
Yep.
and they match. So in other words, each of you's, everything's correct, we're good.
So
That the
Carol was
housekeeping
clicked
was-
on the wrong tab is what
Yeah,
she
just, it was on the wrong tab.
Okay.
She was
So-
on the wrong tab.
You're assured me that the housekeeping and the parcels that were all scrutinized and that it is correct.
Yes, we corrected it.
I would like to hear from the trustees, Kim, thank you.
Well, they didn't do the work. I did.
Well,
So-
and they have to sign off on it, don't they?
Yes.
So you agree that it's all right from what you've seen?
From what I've seen tonight,
So as long as you're comfortable, because Mr. Beck, like I said, I appreciate you saying we got to make sure we get this right. And after whatever, I'm not sure that it is, but I'm going to take everybody at their word.
CJ Carr, 10403 Willow. Again, the presentation tonight was a good presentation put on. Couple things to bring up. The newsletter from the township, I believe, back in after the September meeting said go to the website, look at the changes and so on and so forth, which was at that time the other list, the previous list. Monday, 2 weeks ago, I asked when the finalized corrected list was going to be on a website, which was then posted, I believe, the 23rd of September. So people might have went to the list September 6th or 7th and said, oh yeah, it looks the same. And then if you looked at the list on the 23rd or the 24th, it went from 180 parcels 181 parcels to 248 parcels. Again, a lot of that is in Loveland Park subdivision. The minutes reflected from the zoning or the land use committee meetings stated that they were looking at the Loveland Castle property, which is what brought up all the concern at the previous meeting, which has been left alone. I don't think there was any conversation about all the property to the north of the Loveland Castle property, which is what brought up a lot of these additional 60, 70 lots that were added on there. So from what I'm understanding, then staff has taken on to themselves without regards to the committee to change all these to single-family residential from what was scenic river or green space, scenic, semi-private, this and that. So there's where a whole bunch of the parcels came up at. So am I right that the committee didn't meet on that? That was all done by staff at the township level, changing those?
I would say because we felt like that was an error
Okay.
from 2009.
One thing you had stated before in your presentation, the whole point of this process is to update the map, fix errors, change things to what the future outlook might look like for the properties in the township. You had also mentioned in Camp Dennison a parcel that was owned by ODOT, which you've switched that to public, semi-public, that type of category. Why is it then there's a multitude, 20, 30 properties in the revised list that has 248 parcels on it, that there are right-of-ways in the middle of Montgomery Road, parcels that again, over the years have been split up. We've changed them from whatever use to office use, mixed use retail, all kinds of different uses if you go through this list. if the state of Ohio owns it to begin with, I think that should be a key that, okay, maybe this is a street or something. Why are we changing the middle of Montgomery Road to future office? When are they going to move Montgomery Road?
Can I ask a question? This was done by a committee of residents from Symmes Township, correct? So here you are questioning what they did, CJ. Did you ever step up to the plate and volunteer for a committee? They worked really hard on this. They did a good job. And all you're sitting here doing is criticizing what the committee did.
I understand what they did.
So here's my point. If you want to come up here and nitpick, and I get that, that's fine. But be part of the solution. Volunteer for a committee instead of coming up here and bashing them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
Okay, you can work, if you feel that we did something wrong, you can work with us, but you get up on camera, meeting after meeting about this, and you bash a committee of volunteers that were trying to do something nice for the township. So how is that fair? Volunteer. Be part of the solution. If you think we're doing such a bad job, volunteer for a committee. Be on a land use committee. Please, we would love to have you. We open this up to every resident in the Symmes Township. We would have loved to have 50 people on the committee, but we didn't have that. We had a small group of people that were interested in helping the township. And you and Carol get up here and you bash them for something they tried really hard to do.
This doesn't have directly to go with the committee.
It does have to do with the
after
committee.
the July
because they sat
meeting.
there and they went through every parcel. And if you heard tonight, mistakes were made in 2009 too, and Carol was on that committee. So she made mistakes too. So nobody's perfect. And we're trying to do our best. We're trying to do our best to make it correct. That's what we're doing. Kim went through it with a fine-tooth comb. They went through them with a fine-tooth comb. Sometimes mistakes are made and they get fixed. This is a land use plan. It is not zoning. If something came in front of us that was not correct and they were trying to get a zone change, they would not get it. Ask them, okay? So please, please be the solution, volunteer for a committee and make a difference.
Mrs. Least, I'm tired of remarks that are being made. I was not on the committee. I served as a secretary of the committee.
Yes, but as a secretary, you can put your input too. Because I've been on committees, Carol. If you felt something was wrong, I know you. I know that you would make it right. And I'm just pointing out a point, let me speak, that I'm just making a point that mistakes sometimes are made. And they are being corrected as we find them.
We are saying right now that there are so many mistakes on this list. They may not be on the land use plan, but there are many mistakes on the list. So if the list and the land use plan are supposed to go together, they are not going together.
Well, that list is 2 months old.
Your list is
You're
not
on the
correct.
right list.
You're not on the right
You're not
list.
putting the information out.
It's on there.
Yes, we are.
It just
He
showed it
has
to you.
the current list.
We just showed it to you.
And I
Okay?
can show you on
clicked on the wrong
Montgomery.
tab.
If you look at 17, if you look on, it is site number 17. Montgomery Church is on there. It shows public, semi-public, and it's being changed to the plan use. There are so many right-of-ways that are on this list that do not need to be on the land use plan as being classified.
In your opinion, they're professionals.
If I could answer that question, it's fairly simple. They've always been on the land use plan. All of the right-of-ways have been, and it goes back to when the maps were first digitized in the early 2000s. To go around, and at the time, we would have had to manually cut out both sides of every road from the entire township, and it would have taken far too long. So they were always shown. They were colored on the original colored maps. They were shown as some land use category, usually the one adjacent to them. And if there was the same category on both sides of the street, the whole street was shown as that category. At one point in time, all of the roads were shown as single family, just because that was the category that was started with when they started cutting out the shapes for where all the retail and industrial and multifamily were. So they just left the roads as single family. Zoning doesn't really apply to land use split doesn't really apply to the right of way. It doesn't have an impact on ODOT or the county engineer. The county engineer or ODOT don't need zone changes to build roads. They're exempt from zoning. So the fact that there are right of ways being changed is not surprising, and it doesn't cause any real issue. It's not a real problem or a real concern.
CCJ, you're coming at us, and this is your opinion, and you're allowed to have your own opinion, and great, okay? But the committee's allowed to have their own opinion too. And so they're the professionals, okay? They do this for a living, all right? So,
I am not
okay.
questioning who changed what zoning to what. I'm
You are-
questioning why certain things. It was mentioned in the minutes of the committee's report, and the committee sat down and they did their part. I understand that. It was mentioned in the committee's report even, or in the committee's minutes. How can we make this easier? This is so confusing. Well, it is so confusing, and we went from how many parcels to how many parcels. If we eliminated or changed for the final time all these right-of-ways, we've just lowered the list considerably.
Okay, but they just explained to you why the right-of-ways are in there, so move on. Move on from that. That's why he's here, and that's why he put it in there.
Okay, additionally, even on parcels that you spoke about tonight are shown on the map as being changed, the current map. They are not shown on the current 248 parcels, sorry, wrong. That's the old map or the old drawing. This is the new one. 248 parcels does not include all the parcels that were changed that you spoke about this evening. This map is not correct. That has nothing to do with the committee. Okay, it has to do with the housekeeping now that everybody was going to put up maps side by side, look at them, scrutinize them, make sure it's right. That's all I got to say. We have too many times over and over again, something is done, and then we come back 6 months, 6 years later, and it's like, oh, well, this is what I thought they meant to do.
In your opinion.
You're calling it a map, but you're holding up a spreadsheet. What are you talking about? Are you talking about a map or a spreadsheet? Are you talking about the map that was up here on the screen?
The map is correct.
Okay, that's
The
what
map
we're
does not
going
match the
with.
spreadsheet.
We're going with the map.
And
Okay,
that's what the map is there.
so then the spreadsheet means nothing.
The spreadsheet is a tool to get to the end point. The map is the end point.
Okay, so if it's not on the spreadsheet, it doesn't matter.
If it's not on the spreadsheet.
If it's not listed out as a parcel on the spreadsheet
statement.
for a change, it doesn't matter if
I
it's on
don't
the
know,
map.
but the map is the
When
map.
the trustees are considering the updated land use plan map, that's what they're doing.
Okay, so they're going to update the map, and it doesn't matter what all the parcel lots say then. That's what I'm getting.
The maps they're adopting are what's
The
changing.
map is the map.
That doesn't make any sense. No, everything is important, okay? We're doing the best to get everything correct. It was scrutinized, and the map is the final version. The
Okay, and
spreadsheet is a means to an end.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying, though. Everything on the map is not on the spreadsheet, though. The current
Yes.
spreadsheet that was just printed off
The map is on the
yesterday.
spreadsheet. And I disagree with you. Everything on the map is on the spreadsheet.
Okay, can you
Which
find me
spreadsheet?
parcel number 620?
I'm
No,
not
because
gonna
I
go
don't
there.
have, I do
680.
not have my auditor's webpage up, so we can
Well, you
debate
can look at the
parcel maps
map
all night long, or
Or look at
parcel
the
numbers.
spreadsheet, it's not on there.
CJ, so
Okay,
this is my
your opinion.
suggestion. Next time we have a committee, please volunteer for it. And then you can make sure everything is absolutely correct.
Did the
They
committee
did
make
a
the
good
change?
job.
The
They
committee
worked
did a
hard.
good job.
They did a good job. Stop
committee-
bashing them and bashing everything they do and what Kim does.
The
Kim
committee-
is a good administrator. She works really hard to make everything right. Nobody is perfect. People make mistakes, okay? Sometimes something might get done in error. And I know it's your job to pick it out, and I understand that. But please, understand, we are trying to do a good job.
I understand that.
Anyone else?
Hello, everybody. Jeff Reichman, 9519 Appomattox Court. I was on the committee, and I'm also on the zoning commission too. So I just want to say that Steve and Brian really did a great job of shepherding us through this whole process. It took a lot of time. I think we all learned quite a bit from the expert guidance that they provided. I just want to say that I think that, as was mentioned, we looked at not only what current use is, but particularly on Montgomery Road and that area. We spent a lot of time talking about future use. And quite frankly, Montgomery Road is a challenge because, as you all know, there's houses on Montgomery Road that are probably not going to be houses next time they're redeveloped. There are churches and there's other buildings that are mixed use buildings that are probably going to be changed into other kinds of uses. And so we spent, I think, a lot of time, probably the most, if you want, contentious debates, if you will, talking about what really the best options for those are. And I think coming up with the mixed use category was really a smart move that Steve and Brian really helped us with to get us to better understand what will happen on Montgomery Road, which obviously is our largest commercial area. Also in the areas on Loveland Madeira, I think we also did a really good job of trying to take what was relatively disorganized areas and streamline it into contiguous and streamlined development. So again, I think you guys did a great job, and I think the committee as a whole really did a good job. Phil, appreciate you being part of that committee as well. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you,
did a
Jeff.
great job. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'm going to move on. Do we want to move this up or do we just want to address it later? Address it later.
Yeah, we can stay with it.
What?
Go down the list. Okay. So I move approval of disbursements warrant number 78408-78476 in the amount of $998,541.51.
Second.
Discussion, roll call. Aye.
Brian? Aye.
Aye.
Reports, law director,
Thank you. No report tonight.
police,
No, nothing good.
thank you. Fire,
I know the fire chief's already submitted his report to you. We have nothing further to add.
thank you. Director of Public Works, I don't think Bill's with us tonight. We haven't had any committees, right? Have we had committees? No.
No.
Okay, other? No. Correspondence? Events and meetings? The photo contest for Symmes Township residents, it opens October 1st and it goes through October 31st, 2020. I can say that I've seen some of the submissions already, and I'm excited because we haven't had them this early in a long time. So I think the contest is really taken off. So thank you for all that. Columbus Day is observed Monday, October 12th, 2020. Office will be closed. The Finance Committee meeting will be Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, and that's going to be a Zoom meeting at 6 p.m. Parks Shelter rental season closes October 15th. Zoning Commission meeting will be Wednesday, October 21st, 2020, and that's going to also be the Zoom. I'm very excited to say that we have Halloween on Saturday, October 31st, 2020, and that's from 6 to 8. So I hope everybody gets out and enjoys it. If you don't feel comfortable, don't open your door or don't go trick-or-treating. Board of Zoning Appeals meeting is Monday, November 2nd, 2020, and that's a Zoom. And then a regular trustee meeting Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the Safety Service Center. I do want to add one thing. The township has been working really hard on the Mead Trail. We're trying to give people options to get outside. And I know I say this every meeting that park usage is up 80%. So I think we've learned during this pandemic how important our parks are in Symmes Township. And so what we did, since we could not have our Fall for Symmes event this year, we decorated the Mead Trail for Halloween. And so I want to encourage everybody to get out and enjoy it. It's fun. I was there the other night just at dusk, and there was a family walking around with their flashlights, having a fun time. We have a hay maze. We decorated the building itself. And if you look in the windows, we have just things set up. So please get out and enjoy. So moving on to old business, I move approval of resolutions 2020-58, resolution adopting revision to the Symmes Township Land Use Plan and requesting acceptance of such revision by the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission.
Second.
Roll call, discussion.
I'd like to be assured that the packet I have in front of me, resolution 2020-58, the maps are the ones shown tonight, and the spreadsheet that is attached to it is the appropriate one.
Yes.
Okay, I heard a yes.
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Bill, anything?
I would just like to reiterate that I appreciate the Land Use Committee, appreciate their dedication, their time, their effort, helping the township improve and move forward. I appreciate the county guiding us. Thank you. And I appreciate the comments of the residents at every step of the way, our public open house back in January and our public hearings since then. We've received a lot of feedback and it's made the end product better. So we thank everyone.
Yes, and because of volunteers, we can move forward in Symmes Township. So please get out and volunteer. If you see anything, any of our committees, finance, anything, please volunteer. Anything else? Roll call.
Ms. Lees.
Aye.
Mr. Bryan.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
New business. I move approval of liquor permit for Super Medicaid, Mercado Plaza Sol LLC, 8729 Fields Erdel Road, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45249, without a hearing.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Lees.
Aye.
Mr. Bryan.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
I move a motion to schedule a public hearing for the proposed zoning text amendments Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020.
At 7 p.m.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
at the beginning of the meeting.
Is it 7?
7 p.m.
7
Yeah, it's not
p.m.
on there.
Okay. Do I have a
Second.
second? Do we need to discuss it? It is election night that night, so it's going to be a blended meeting. So you can do it on Zoom. You can come in however you feel comfortable. If you can't make it, you can call and give your comments to the township a day before, a week before, whatever. You can send us an email, whatever you want to do. So we make sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak. Okay, roll call.
Ms. Lees.
Aye.
Mr. Bryan.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-81, resolution accepting the amount and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Second.
Discussion?
We don't have any tax levies on the ballot,
No.
Nope.
so this is really just a certification of what is outstanding right now.
Yes. Okay, roll call.
Ms. Lees.
Aye.
Mr. Bryan.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-82, resolution, if I could speak through my mask, resolution amending the financial policies for Symmes Township.
Second.
I think we discussed this at the, our,
Work session.
thank you, I couldn't spit that out. Okay,
And I'd like to state that the minutes of the work session were approved tonight and will be available on the website for those who want to know more details.
okay, roll call.
Ms. Lees.
Aye.
Mr. Bryan.
Aye.
Mr. Beck.
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-83, resolution authorizing the purchase of 3 heart monitors in the amount not to exceed $57,165 for Skylar Medical.
From Stryker.
Stryker, I'm sorry.
Second.
I didn't know. Discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-84, resolution authorizing expenditures in the amount not to exceed $17,100 for touchless bottle fillers through Advancement Refreshment Solution and dispensing with the second reading.
Second.
Discussion. I have one comment. I'm so excited to get these because I don't want to use plastic bottles anymore. I usually don't use them, but I had to use them tonight. So I'm glad that we can refill bottles in our parks. I think that's awesome.
CARES Act funding?
Yes.
Yes.
So roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-85, resolution authorizing the Township Administrator to sign a contract with Cincinnati Bell for additional internet service in the increased amount of $43,500 for a term of 6 months. 60 months, I'm sorry.
Second.
Discussion. That's also out of CARES Act, right?
Yes, and this will increase our speed from 10 megs to 100 megs so that we'll be able to run the necessary services that we need for live meetings and Zoom and all that kind of
Zooms and all
stuff.
that. All right, that's awesome. Okay, roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-86, authorizing the Township Administrator to enter in an agreement with Larry's Lock in the amount of $13,881 to replace the entry doors at the Administration and Service Department with new electronic keyless entry doors.
Second.
That's also with CARES Act,
Yep.
right? Roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-87, resolution approving expenditures in the amount not to exceed $10,262.87 for retro touchless bottle fillers, hand dryers, and retro hand-free flush kits through Pro Dryers and dispensing with the second reading.
Second.
This is also with CARES Act.
Yes.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-88, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Works and Choice One Engineering to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs and to executive contracts, execute contracts as required. I don't have my glasses on tonight.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Is that a biennial?
Aye. What did you say?
Is that a biennial
Biennial?
submission?
What?
Biennial submission
Every 2 years.
every 2 years?
No, OPWC is a submission every year. Is that what you're talking about?
OPWC, okay. I saw the state capital improvement, so.
No, it's, that's a lot of what it's for, but this would be capital improvement that we want to do in Montgomery Trace.
Okay. So this is limited in scope rather than grandiose.
What did you say, Ken?
It's limited in scope to what you want.
Right, for Montgomery Trace. So what we're proposing to do is replace curb and gutter and add a curb drain in that neighborhood and replace the paving.
Okay.
The pavement.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of Resolution G 2020-89, resolution authorizing the Township Administrator to enter an agreement with the Hamilton County Commissioner's Office to be Commissioners to be a grant recipient of CARES Act funding through Hamilton County.
Second.
Discussion. I think that's great.
I think it's a requirement. Before we can accept any money, we have to say we want it.
Roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
I move approval of the following expenditures and authorizing for the Township Administrator to sign any necessary contracts, agreements, or paperworks. A, amended increase overall appropriations 14L from $298,838.83 to $1,059,885.83. B, amended, create new line from 14-L-07 contract salaries to $761.47 or $761,047. C, expenditure $18,818.67 ICRC second quarter franchise fees. D, expenditure $7,852 Millennial Business Systems for a new copier. E, expenditure $7,821.44 for Polyguide Ice for synthetic ice rink, which I'm excited about. This is just a rental this year, right, Kim? To see
No,
if
it's
people
actually,
like-
they didn't have any for rental, so it's a purchase.
Okay, and this, okay, for Hopewell Meadows. Let's see. F, expenditure $3,440 for environmental designs for painting the restrooms at Stonebridge Park. I think G was removed. So I need a second.
Second.
Did you say
Discussion.
G was removed?
Mhm.
Okay.
You already voted on that.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Ms. Leo?
Aye.
Mr. Bryan?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, this is the last hearing from residents. If there's anybody via Zoom or anybody who would like to get up and speak.
I've got a couple issues, but I'll save those for the next meeting. I do have a couple questions on your expenditure C or E for a skating ice rink. Didn't we try those once before and it didn't work? And
I know in the past we tried an ice rink, but it was not, this is a synthetic ice rink, and the problem with the ice rink in the past is that it did not freeze. So this synthetic you can use it in 100 degrees.
did I understand that it's a purchase, not a rental?
Right.
Okay. It was just, there was no discussion, so I was just wondering about it. At the last meeting, you adopted resolution 2020-44, which was for the purchase of video recording. Can you tell me a little bit more what that's for?
Kim?
It is for us to record our meetings and to be able to video them and to live broadcast them and to do Zoom.
So you would no longer be doing ICRC?
No.
So Joe's comment about the township saving $80,000 a year was because of that?
Yes.
Okay. So the township really isn't saving $80,000. You are getting an additional $80,000 of revenue because the township was strictly a pass-through from the money collected from residents to ICRC because the resolution was adopted to collect an additional 2%, which is what ICR charges. So my question to the board is, are you going to remove that 2% franchise fees from our cable bills? Since you're no longer going to be part of ICRC?
No.
No?
No.
So this is just another tax that you're putting on the residents' revenue stream?
It's not without precedent, Carol. Loveland's done it, Sycamore Township has done it, they've dropped ICRC.
Well, that's true. You can drop ICRC. I'm not saying not drop ICRC. What I'm saying is that there's a 5% franchise fees charged to residents for cable, Cincinnati Bell and Time Warner Spectrum. 3% goes to the township. 2% was enacted in order to pay the ICRC fee.
Public service.
So you're no
To
longer
pay public service.
Doing ICRC,
It's to pay public
So-
service, and we're going to do it in a different way.
but you have no fees.
So aren't we using that money to buy the equipment? I mean, isn't that a way that you look at it?
The equipment is what? How much? And you're going to be collecting $80,000 a year from the residents. So again, it's another revenue stream that the residents have no say on. So, thank you.
Here we go again.
CJ Carr, just to kind of sum up or put to what I was speaking about in the land use public hearing there. Approximately where I'm standing at, according to Hamilton County, is owned by Hamilton County Commissioners. Why do we not own all the property under the Township Safety Center here? And I found this by going through the sheet for the land use map, that none of these parcels are consolidated, which is what zoning is required and building is required, but I just thought it was odd that Hamilton County Commissioners own a strip right through the middle of Symmes Townships and the residents of Symmes Township's building. That in the future, when things aren't corrected, when they're done in the beginning, could throw up some kind of issue later on.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I move, there's no executive session, so I move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Lee?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.